When my phone buzzed that night, I expected a false alarm. Instead, my security feed showed Emily Lopez heels, flashlight, and all picking my front door lock like she was in Mission Impossible. I sat there in disbelief, watching the woman who fined me for non-compliant mailbox paint sneak into my living room with a tranquilizer gun and a giant tote bag labeled Rescue Operation. She had no idea my dogs weren't kenneled. They were sleeping freely, waiting, silent, disciplined, and loyal as ever. A few seconds later, I saw her freeze. Then came the barking. 5 thunderous, synchronized roars of canine justice. That was the night the HOA war went from ridiculous to legendary. Before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from and the time, then hit subscribe. Because trust me, this one's going to bite harder than any HOA fine. I moved into Maplewood Estates 2 years ago for peace, not politics. After 20 years as a K-9 officer, I wanted quiet morning space for my dogs and neighbors who minded their own business. I bought a tidy brick house at the end of a cul-de-sac, built a sturdy fence, and turned the backyard into a haven for my retired partners, 5 German shepherds, who'd served beside me through everything from drug busts to disaster rescues. Their names were Rex Atlas, Bear Nova, and Scout. They weren't pets, they were family. For 6 glorious months, life was exactly what I'd imagined. The dogs adapted beautifully, calm, obedient, and loyal as ever. We'd take morning jogs through the trails, spend afternoons training in the yard, and relax on the porch at dusk. My neighbors seemed friendly enough. They waved, made small talk, even dropped off welcome cookies. Then came Emily Lopez. Emily was the newly elected HOA president, early 50s, divorced, perfectly coiffed and permanently displeased. She moved like someone born to supervise. Her hair never moved, her tone never softened, and her clipboard never left her hand. You could hear her before you saw her, that sharp click of designer heels against pavement announcing judgment was near. Our first interaction was deceptively polite. She knocked on my door with a smile so tight it could crack glass. "Mr. Clark," she began, "I'm here to talk about your dogs." "My dogs?" I asked. "Is there an issue?" "Well," she said, peering past me into the house, "several residents have expressed concern about their size. German shepherds are, intimidating. We do try to maintain a sense of serenity in our community. They're trained service animals," I said evenly. "Quiet, obedient, and fenced in. I promise serenity's safe." She didn't like that answer. "Still," she pressed, "we have noise ordinances, and I've noticed barking late at night." I almost laughed. "That must have been your imagination. My dogs don't bark unless commanded or provoked." Her smile twitched. "I'll be monitoring the situation," she said, writing something on her clipboard. And from that day forward, she did. Within a week, I received my first notice of violation. Reason: excessive noise from animals. Fine $150. I appealed, of course, attaching a letter from the county's animal control officer confirming my dogs weren't a nuisance. The HOA rescinded the fine, but the message was clear: I was now on Emily's radar. The second notice came 2 weeks later, unapproved fencing color. Apparently my dark cedar fence wasn't community beige enough. The third, grass length, exceeding HOA limit. I measured it precisely 2 inches, the legal maximum. It didn't matter. She'd made it her mission to chip away at me one fine at a time. At first I tried ignoring her. You can't argue with someone addicted to authority. But ignoring her only fueled her obsession. Soon she was walking past my property daily, stopping to take photos of my yard and recording barking that didn't exist. My cameras caught her more than once, peeking over my fence, snapping pictures like some suburban paparazzi. One Saturday morning, as I was washing my truck, I caught her in the act. "Morning, Emily," I called, wiping my hands on a rag. Getting a good angle, she flinched, lowering her phone. "I'm documenting potential violations," she said stiffly. "Like what, the grass, the fence, or my patience?" She pursed her lips. "You don't need to be rude. I'm only trying to keep our community safe." Safe from what I asked. Clean yards and disciplined dogs, her nostrils flared. "Dangerous animals," she snapped. "Those dogs shouldn't be here. They're a public hazard." I took a slow step toward her. "You know what's funny, Emily? My dogs have better manners than most people I've met in this neighborhood, including the ones trespassing." Her face went crimson. She turned and marched off heels, stabbing the pavement. By the following week, I'd received another notice, this time accusing me of failure to comply with community tone and decorum. I didn't even know what that meant. I framed it and hung it in my office as a reminder of how absurd people can be when they crave control. Still, I wasn't about to roll over. I documented everything: photos, video footage, dates, times interactions. Old habits from law enforcement die hard. And something about Emily's behavior felt unstable. not just bossy obsessed. She watched too closely, remembered too many details, and spoke with the conviction of someone who thought she owned the place. Then came the incident at the monthly HOA meeting. I attended out of curiosity, not compliance. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a place that smelled faintly of disinfectant and desperation. Emily stood at the front addressing a dozen neighbors about standards. Midway through, she brought up problem properties. Her PowerPoint slide, I'm not kidding, featured an image of my house. Some residents, she said, tapping the photo, believe they're exempt from the rules. Multiple barking complaints, unsightly fencing, and aggressive animals. This cannot continue. I raised my hand. Emily, you could have just said my name. Her smile was venomous. Matthew, you're welcome to speak briefly. Sure, I said, standing. Here's the thing. My dogs are service trained. They've saved lives. They're quiet, legal, and licensed. You're spreading false claims, and I'd appreciate it if you stopped lying to our neighbors. The room went silent. One neighbor coughed. Another whispered. Is he serious? Emily's face tightened. I'm not lying. I'm concerned. Well, your concern is trespassing, I said, and my cameras can prove it. Gasps, murmurs. Someone in the back muttered. She's been on his property, Emily sputtered. That's absurd. I was simply performing a visual inspection of my backyard, I asked. Behind a locked gate, her composure cracked. You'll regret this, she hissed under her breath. I smiled. I doubt it. From that moment on, things escalated fast. Animal control showed up twice more, both times, leaving embarrassed when they saw the dogs calmly sitting by command. Then came the HOA letters in triplicate the passive-aggressive notes left on my mailbox, the whispered gossip at community events. But the moment that told me this had gone too far was the day I found my back gate slightly ajar. I always lock it. Always. That night, I checked my footage. The camera by the fence had glitched for 15 minutes, frozen on static. And when it resumed, there was a faint shadow moving away down the alley. I replayed that clip a dozen times, my gut tightening with every second. Emily's habit of lurking had crossed into something darker. This wasn't about barking anymore. This was personal. I reinforced every lock, added motion sensors, and upgraded my cameras with night vision. I even put a small sign by the gate, "Smile, you're on camera." The next morning, I caught Emily staring at it from across the street. Her lips moved, but I couldn't hear the words. That night, I poured myself a whiskey and watched my security feed like a man waiting for a storm. I didn't know it yet, but that storm would hit sooner and harder than I imagined. Because when someone like Emily Lopez decides she's the law, there's no reasoning left. There's only escalation. And when she finally crossed that line, she didn't just break the law. She broke into the wrong house. If you've ever lived under an HOA, you know the type. The clipboard commandos, the self-appointed rulers of suburbia. But Emily Lopez was in a league of her own. Most people enforce rules to keep order. She enforced them to feed her ego. And after I embarrassed her at that meeting, she made it her full-time mission to make my life miserable. It started with petty inconveniences. A note taped to my door, garbage bins must not be visible from the street. Another letter mailbox paint tone inconsistent with community standard. Then came the fines. Small ones at first, $50, $75, like little stabs meant to remind me who she thought was in charge. But the real trouble began when she turned the neighborhood against me. Emily began holding emergency HOA meetings focused solely on my property. She spread rumors that my dogs had attacked a delivery driver, that they were aggressive, even feral. I found out from a neighbor, Denise, who stopped me one afternoon while I was walking bare. You know, Matt, she said carefully, I've been hearing things. Let me guess, I sighed. That my dogs are secretly running a dogfighting ring in my basement. Denise looked almost apologetic. She said one of them bit a child last summer. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped Bear's leash. That's impressive considering I didn't even live here last summer. Denise blushed. I thought so. Just be careful. She's saying she wants to bring this up to county safety. That night I logged into the community Facebook group. Sure enough there, it was a post by Emily dripping with faux concern. Neighbors, I regret to inform you that multiple residents have expressed fear regarding a certain resident's dogs. While I appreciate the service background of these animals, we cannot allow dangerous behavior in our community. Please remain vigilant and report any suspicious barking. Suspicious barking? I stared at the phrase, half furious, half amused. I typed my reply slowly, each word deliberate. As the owner of those dangerous dogs, all retired law enforcement K9S, I invite anyone with concerns to review their training certifications or speak with the county animal control officer. He's been here twice. They passed every test. Maybe focus on actual problems instead of imaginary ones. The post disappeared within an hour. The next morning, another notice arrived. Unauthorized online conduct detrimental to HOA unity. I framed that one too. The following week, I caught her again. I just returned from a supply run carrying bags of dog food when I saw movement by my fence. Emily was standing there, camera phone raised, snapping photos like she was on safari. I set the bags down and walked over. Need something. She didn't even flinch. Documenting violations, she said crisply. Violations of what? Oxygen usage, she frowned. Your fence is 2 inches higher than regulation. It obstructs the aesthetic uniformity of the neighborhood. It also keeps people from trespassing, I said pointedly. Don't be smart with me, Mr. Clark. I'm just doing my duty. Funny, I said, I thought your duty was managing the HOA, not stalking my property like a burglar. She turned on her heel and stormed off. But this time I noticed something new. She wasn't just angry. She was unraveling. Over the next month, her behavior grew erratic. She started driving past my house several times a day, slowing down to take notes. My cameras caught her photographing my mailbox, my lawn, even my truck. One morning I found a fresh set of muddy footprints near my backyard gate, size 7 women's shoe. My gut told me it was her. I tightened the locks again. Then came a visit from animal control. The officer, a young guy named Morales, looked uncomfortable as he stepped onto my porch. Mr. Clark, he said, we received a report of possible neglect or abuse of animals at this address. I sighed. Let me guess, from Emily Lopez. He nodded sheepishly. I'm required to check. No problem, I said. Come on in. You'll meet the happiest, healthiest dogs in the county. Within 10 minutes, Morales was laughing on my living room floor while Nova rolled over for belly rubs. I've seen hundreds of dogs, he said. Yours are the most disciplined I've met. Whoever called this in either hates dogs or hates you. Both, I said. Mostly the latter. He filed a clean report and left. But I could feel the pressure building. That same afternoon, I was on my porch repairing a latch when Emily's husband Frank approached. I'd met him once or twice, quiet man, decent, clearly worn down by life with her. Mr. Clark, he began awkwardly. I wanted to apologize. My wife's been not herself lately. She's under a lot of stress. Stress doesn't explain trespassing, I said. He sighed. I know. I've tried talking to her. She's convinced you're a threat to the neighborhood. Says you're hiding something. I'm hiding peace and quiet, I muttered. Frank nodded sadly. Just watch yourself. She's not rational anymore. I wish I'd taken that warning more seriously. A few nights later, my cameras picked her up again, 11:47 p.m. She was standing across the street, staring at my house, not moving, just watching. Her phone screen glowed faintly in her hand. Then she walked away. I downloaded the footage, time-stamped it, and added it to my growing folder labeled Evidence, Lopez. 2 days after that, a certified letter arrived. The HOA emblem was embossed in gold across the top. Notice of final warning, Mr. Clark, pursuant to community safety and noise regulations, you are hereby ordered to remove all canines from your property within 30 days or face escalating fines and potential legal action. At the bottom, Emily's signature, sharp, deliberate, angry. I read it twice, then smiled. 30 days, huh? We'll see. That night, I opened a bottle of bourbon and sat in my office surrounded by years of commendations and canine photos. My dogs rested quietly at my feet, loyal and steady as ever. They didn't know a war was brewing, but I did. Emily Lopez wasn't just enforcing rules anymore. She was obsessed with control, with punishment, with me. She wasn't going to stop until she broke something: my patience, my peace, or my door. And I was beginning to realize she might just try all three. The next morning, I found something wedged between my fence boards, a small strip of raw meat. I froze. Rex sniffed it but didn't touch it. I scooped it up with gloves and sealed it in a plastic bag. At the vet's lab, the results were quick and sickening: traces of tranquilizers. Enough to sedate a 100-pound dog. My stomach dropped. It was official. She'd crossed the line from harassment to attempted harm. I handed the report to a police officer I knew from my old department. You can't prove it was her, he said carefully, unless you have footage of her throwing it. I'll get it, I promised. That night I upgraded my security system again. Motion lights, silent alarms, interior cameras. Every entry point was covered. And for the first time in years, I locked the dogs inside for the night. They didn't like it, restless pacing, but something in my gut told me I'd made the right call. Emily's obsession had reached its peak. The rumors, the trespassing, the poison, it all pointed to one thing: she wasn't just angry. She was planning something. When I caught her on camera a few days later, sitting in her car across the street at midnight, jotting notes in a little black notebook, I realized the truth. She wasn't watching my house anymore. She was studying it. By the time September rolled around, Emily Lopez had completely lost touch with reality. What started as an obsession over my dogs had twisted into something darker, an unstable need to destroy me no matter the cost. The neighbors whispered about her erratic behavior, her shouting matches with her husband, and the way she'd been driving through the neighborhood at night, jotting notes in that cursed clipboard. I tried to focus on normal life, but the tension was constant. Every time a branch snapped outside or my dogs growled at the window, I felt that flicker of adrenaline from my police days. The kind that tells you danger isn't coming, it's already here. Then one morning I walked into the backyard and froze. Near the fence line beneath the maple tree lay 3 small pieces of raw meat, each about the size of a baseball. The dogs hadn't touched them. Rex, my oldest, just sat nearby, staring at me with that look only a canine handler would recognize a warning. I put on gloves and bagged the meat, took it straight to the vet for testing. I didn't even have to say much. They'd seen enough of these cases before. The results came back within 24 hours. Traces of acepromazine, a heavy tranquilizer, and bromadiolone, a chemical found in rat poison. My blood boiled. I drove straight to the sheriff's office and slammed the report onto the counter. "She tried to poison my dogs," I said. The deputy on duty, an old friend from my K-9 days named Harris, frowned. "You got proof it was her." "Not on camera," I admitted. "But who else would do it? No one else in this neighborhood hates them or me this much." He sighed. "Without footage, it's circumstantial. I'll file a report, but unless she admits it or we catch her in the act, there's not much we can do." It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was the one I expected. I'd been in law enforcement long enough to know how the system worked. You needed hard evidence, and I was going to get it. That night, I installed a new layer of protection: 4 additional cameras, motion sensors, silent alarms that pinged my phone directly. I wasn't just securing my home anymore, I was preparing for war. The next few days were tense. Emily stopped her usual patrols, which made me even more suspicious. The calm before the storm is always the worst part. Then one afternoon I caught her outside the local post office. She didn't see me at first. She was talking to another neighbor, gesturing wildly. I parked and walked closer just in time to catch her, saying, "I'll handle this problem once and for all. Those animals don't belong here." The way she said it, low, confident, almost serene, chilled me more than the threat itself. I walked straight up to her. "Afternoon, Emily. Planning another HOA inspection?" She froze, eyes wide, but only for a second. "Mr. Clark," she said, voice sugary sweet. "Always a pleasure." "Funny," I said. "You're the only person I know who can say that while plotting a felony." Her expression hardened. "Excuse me, don't play dumb. You threw poisoned meat into my yard. My dogs could have died." She smirked. "Prove it." That was all she said before turning and walking away. Her heels clicked against the pavement like gunfire. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards made me check the cameras again. I'd spent 20 years training dogs to protect others, but this was different. This was personal. I started noticing little details, small things that didn't add up. My garbage bins moved a few feet overnight. My mail went missing for 2 days, then mysteriously reappeared. My security lights tripped at random hours. Someone was watching my house. On Thursday evening, I found tire marks in front of my driveway, faint but fresh. I checked the footage, but nothing showed. Whoever it was, they knew how to avoid detection. That's when I decided to take it a step further. I upgraded my interior security. Miniature night vision cameras in every main room, connected to a cloud server and hidden behind vents and bookshelves. A silent alarm tied to my phone. A motion sensor by the back door that triggered a 10-second recording every time someone opened it. If she wanted to break in, I was going to let her walk right into a trap. 2 nights later, I got my first real sign. Around midnight, my dogs started pacing restlessly. Nova whined at the window, ears perked. Scout growled low just once, then stared at the door. They could sense something I couldn't see yet. I checked the cameras, nothing unusual. But I knew that instinct. When 5 dogs react the same way, something's off. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I noticed Emily's car parked 3 houses down. She was sitting inside staring at my property, pretending to scroll on her phone. When I stepped onto the porch, she drove off. By now, even the neighbors had started to turn. People whispered. A few brave ones stopped by to quietly apologize. "We thought she was just strict," one woman said. "But she's gone too far. Everyone's scared of her." It was strange being the one people feared because of rumors, then becoming the one they looked to for reassurance. That evening, I took one last precaution. I decided the dogs would stay inside for the night. Usually they slept in the kennels out back, but something in my gut screamed not to risk it. I gave them their usual routine feeding, walk training cues, and locked up the house. Before going to bed, I checked every camera angle twice. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. I remember lying there staring at the ceiling, thinking about how far this had gone. A homeowners association wasn't supposed to feel like a battlefield, but with Emily Lopez, logic didn't apply. This wasn't about rules anymore, it was about control, pride, and power. She'd lost the ability to separate her title from her identity. I'd seen that kind of mindset before in criminals who couldn't let go of authority. They always pushed until something or someone pushed back. And I was done being polite. I didn't know it yet, but that decision to let my dog sleep inside would change everything, because in just over 24 hours, Emily Lopez would make her move. She would cross the line that separates petty tyranny from outright crime. And when she did, she wouldn't just find a locked door, she'd find 5 professional guardians waiting on the other side. The night before it happened, the air felt heavy electric, like the world was holding its breath. I checked my cameras again before bed. Everything looked normal. No movement, no lights, no signs of life outside. But as I turned off the lamp, Nova lifted her head and stared toward the hallway, ears twitching. Bear growled softly, the kind of growl that comes from instinct, not irritation. I knelt beside them, scratching their necks. "Easy," I whispered. "We've got this." They relaxed, lying back down, but their eyes stayed open, watching, waiting. So did I. When I finally drifted off, it was sometime after midnight. The house was silent. The dogs were scattered around, guarding their zones, just as they'd been trained. I didn't know that within the next few hours, my cameras would record something that would go viral across the country, a high-definition lesson in why you never ever break into a canine handler's home. Because at 2:17 a.m., Emily Lopez would pick the lock on my front door. And she'd learn the hard way that some boundaries aren't meant to be tested. 217 amperes. That's the exact time the first motion alert hit my phone. I'll never forget it. The vibration jolted me awake, followed by the faint ping that meant one of the exterior sensors had been tripped. I sat up, heart already hammering, as the live feed loaded on my screen. At first, the image was grainy, the front porch still and quiet, bathed in pale moonlight. Then a figure stepped into frame. Emily Lopez. She wore dark clothing, black leggings, a gray hoodie, sneakers, a ridiculous outfit for someone who normally dressed like she was attending a city council gala. Her hair was tied back tightly, her face tense and determined. In her left hand, a flashlight. In her right, a set of lock-picking tools. My stomach turned. "She's actually doing it," I whispered. The dogs were already awake. Rex lifted his head first, then Nova, then the rest followed, each one moving in eerie synchronization. They didn't bark, not yet. Just waited, muscles coiled. They could feel my tension, my heartbeat, the shift in the air. I turned the volume up on the feed. I could hear her muttering to herself. "Almost got it. Come on." A faint click, then the soft creak of my front door opening. I froze. My hand hovered over the silent alarm on my phone. I'd already trained my dogs for this kind of scenario hold position until commanded. I wanted the police to see everything. She slipped inside, moving carefully, flashlight beam cutting across the living room. Her movements were awkward but practiced. She'd clearly done this before. That realization made my skin crawl. In the footage, she closed the door quietly behind her and glanced around. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out something metallic, a small tranquilizer gun, the kind used for animal control. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered. I tapped my phone, dialing 911. The operator's calm voice answered immediately. 911. "What's your emergency?" "This is Matthew Clark, 1123 Maplewood," I said, keeping my voice steady. "The HOA president just broke into my house. I have her on live security feed. She's armed with a tranquilizer gun. Officers are on their way," the operator said. "Are you safe right now?" "Safer than she is," I replied, glancing down at my 5 silent soldiers. Emily crept deeper into the living room, whispering to herself. "It's okay, babies. You're safe now. I'm here to get you out." She honestly believed she was saving them. I watched her step toward the kitchen where I kept the dogs' kennels, though they hadn't slept in them in months. Her flashlight scanned the floor, glinting off the food bowls. She smiled, whispering, "Good, you're here." Then she reached for the door handle leading to the hallway, the one that opened toward the bedrooms. That's when Rex moved. A low growl rolled through the house, deep and resonant like thunder crawling across the floorboards. Emily froze. Her flashlight trembled in her hand. "Who's there?" she whispered. Another growl, this time from the other side, Bear moving into position. The camera in the hallway caught it all, 5 shadows emerging from the dark ears, forward eyes glowing faintly in the beam of her light. The way they fanned out around her was pure instinct, the same formation they'd used during search and rescue drills surrounding a target while maintaining a perimeter. Emily stumbled backward, her back hitting the wall. "Easy. Easy, puppies." The dogs didn't move closer, but they didn't back off either. Their posture said everything, one wrong move, and you'll regret it. She tried to steady herself, raising a hand. "It's okay. I'm just—" Her sentence cut off when Nova barked one loud commanding bark that echoed through the entire house. Emily screamed, dropping her flashlight. The tranquilizer gun clattered to the floor. The remaining dogs joined in, barking in unison, not attacking, not lunging, just asserting dominance. The kind of bark that shakes walls and bones alike. I watched the chaos unfold from the camera feed, heart pounding but mind calm. Years of training kicked in. I grabbed my badge from my nightstand, an old habit, and slipped it into my pocket. Then I headed downstairs. The sight that met me was something out of a twisted comedy sketch. Emily Lopez, self-proclaimed ruler of Maplewood Estates, was pressed against my living room wall, trembling, surrounded by 5 K9s, who looked more like professional bodyguards than pets. Her flashlight rolled across the floor, illuminating the scene in flickering bursts. "Mr. Clark," she gasped when she saw me. "Call them off. They're going to kill me. They're trained, not killers," I said, my voice even. "Unlike you, they know the difference between trespassing and protection." I heard screaming," she stammered. I thought, "Try again." "I came to check on the animals," she said, voice cracking. "I got reports you were abusing them." I cut her off. At 2 in the morning, with a tranquilizer gun and a lockpick set, her face twisted. I didn't." I gestured toward her fallen bag. "Open it." She hesitated. "No." I whistled once, a sharp high note. The dogs straightened, forming a semicircle, eyes locked on her. Her hands shook as she crouched down and unzipped the bag. Out spilled the evidence: tranquilizer darts, drug treats wrapped in foil, bolt cutters, and printed reports filled with fake claims of animal neglect, all with my name on them. I let out a low whistle. "You really came prepared, didn't you?" Emily's eyes darted toward the door, but Scout growled softly. She froze again. "Emily, I said you're lucky. I trained them not to attack. Anyone else's house, you'd be in the ER right now." I was just trying to help," she whispered. "Help," I barked out a laugh. "You broke into my home armed with sedatives to kidnap my dogs. That's not helping. That's criminal." From outside, the faint sound of sirens began to rise, a sound that clearly hit her like a slap. No, she said, panicking. "You called the police." "Of course I did." I crossed my arms. "You didn't think I'd let the HOA handle this one, did you?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "Please, I'll resign. I'll pay the fines. I'll anything. Just don't let them arrest me." I looked at her, this trembling woman who'd spent months tormenting me, spreading lies, threatening my peace, and for a brief moment I almost pitied her. "Almost—" "Emily," I said quietly, "you spent months trying to control everyone around you. Tonight you broke into a cop's house with 5 trained K9s and a tranquilizer gun. Whatever happens next, you earned it." The sirens grew louder, red and blue lights flashing through the windows. My dog stayed perfectly still, watching her as 2 deputies entered through the open front door. One of them was Harris. He took one look at the scene and sighed. "Well, he said this is new." "Breaking and entering," I said simply, "plus animal cruelty and attempted theft." Harris nodded. "We'll add stupidity to the list." Emily started crying, babbling excuses, but it was too late. The deputies cuffed her gently, reading her rights as the dogs sat silently by my side like courtroom witnesses. As they led her out, she shouted, "You can't do this. I'm the HOA president." Rex barked once, sharp and authoritative, as if to say, "Not anymore." I smiled. "You're not even the president of your own decisions anymore." Outside, the entire cul-de-sac was awake. Neighbors peered from porches and windows, phones raised recording. One whispered, "Is that Emily?" Another muttered, "About time." The flashing lights painted the street red and blue, a surreal glow washing over my house. For the first time in months, I felt a deep, satisfying calm. The war was over. But as I stood there watching the patrol car pull away with Emily inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't finished. Not yet. Because people like her, people who live for control, never go quietly. And sure enough, the next morning, my inbox was already filling with HOA emails about an emergency meeting. By sunrise, the entire neighborhood knew what had happened. The footage from my security cameras had already started circulating through group chats, next-door posts, and even a few YouTube channels run by nosy neighbors. One video titled HOA President Meets the K9 Committee hit 3,000 views before noon. I didn't post it myself, but I didn't stop anyone either. When I opened my door that morning, a few of my neighbors were already outside, pretending to water their lawns while sneaking glances toward my house. Some waved awkwardly. Others just gave me that look, a mix of awe and fear. For the first time since moving to Maplewood, I had everyone's attention, and not because of Emily's gossip. The police had processed the scene overnight. Harris stopped by before clocking off his shift to hand me a copy of the report. "You've got her dead to rights," he said, yawning into his coffee. "Breaking and entering animal cruelty, attempted theft. She's looking at multiple charges. Think she'll plead insanity?" I asked. He shrugged. "Wouldn't surprise me. Her husband told us she hasn't been sleeping. Paranoid, keeps notebooks full of residents' names color-coded by who she likes and who she wants fined." I let out a low whistle. "Color-coded vengeance. Now that's HOA efficiency," he chuckled. "Be glad your dog stopped her before she hurt anyone. That footage alone is going to make a lot of people think twice before crossing you. Or before crossing a German Shepherd," I said with a grin. He tipped his hat. "You're a lucky man, Matt. If she'd gotten those darts in any of the dogs, she didn't," I said sharply. "And that's all that matters." By noon, an HOA emergency session had been announced. Of course, they couldn't let the Queen's downfall go uncontested. I debated skipping it, but curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see how far they'd bend to save her, so I printed still images from the footage Emily inside my house, the tranquilizer gun, the bag of sedatives, her terrified face framed by 5 dogs, and brought them along. The meeting was held in the usual place, the Maplewood Community Center, that beige brick box with folding chairs and fluorescent lights that hum just loud enough to drive you insane. The moment I walked in, the room went silent. At the front table sat the remaining HOA board members, including Vice President Harold Green, a pudgy man who looked perpetually guilty about everything, even breathing. His hands trembled as he adjusted the microphone. "Mr. Clark," he said, "thank you for joining us on such short notice. We wanted to discuss the incident involving Mrs. Lopez." "Incident," I echoed. "You mean the felony?" Murmurs rippled through the room. Harold cleared his throat. "Yes, well, we're still gathering details. The board wants to ensure there was no misunderstanding." I placed the photos on the table, sliding them toward him like playing cards. "Looks pretty clear to me." The image of Emily holding the tranquilizer gun was on top. Gasps filled the room. One woman covered her mouth. "Dear Lord," someone whispered. Harold paled. "Mr. Clark, we had no idea, didn't you?" I interrupted. "She's been targeting me for months. I filed 6 complaints about her harassment, and not one of you lifted a finger." Another board member, a woman named Judy, raised a hand nervously. We thought it was a neighborly disagreement. Emily can be intense, but we never imagined she'd break into someone's house, try to drug their dogs," I snapped. "You didn't imagine because you didn't look. You all let her run this place like her personal dictatorship." The silence that followed was deafening. Then from the back of the room a voice spoke up. "He's right. It was Denise, the neighbor, who'd warned me weeks ago." She stood holding her phone high. I have texts from Emily, screenshots. She bragged about making Matt's life miserable. She called it her project. Said she'd save the community from him. A murmur swept through the crowd. Phones buzzed as people exchanged glances and began checking their messages. Another resident, Mark, spoke up. "She fined me $300 for leaving a trash can out 10 minutes too long. When I appealed, she added another $100. Said I was being disrespectful to HOA leadership." Judy buried her face in her hands. "Oh my God," she whispered. The meeting spiraled quickly after that. Resident after resident stood up, each with their own story of Emily's power trips, threats of fines, property inspections, even forged violation letters. Harold finally raised his hands for silence. "Enough. We'll draft a motion to remove her from the board permanently, effective immediately." I leaned back in my chair. "Good. But make sure you include restitution for anyone she fined illegally. And while you're at it, stop pretending this was an isolated incident. You enabled her." He didn't argue. He just nodded, shamefaced. As I stood to leave, someone clapped. Then another. Then the whole room. I wasn't used to applause. It felt awkward, but I nodded in acknowledgement. "Mr. Clark," Harold said before I reached the door, "the board would like to formally apologize for how you were treated. We'd also like to invite you to join the HOA as a board advisor." We could use someone with integrity. I turned back, smiling faintly. Appreciate the offer, but no thanks. I prefer my sanity. Laughter rippled through the room. By evening, the news had broken beyond Maplewood. Local headlines read, HOA president arrested after breaking into resident's home. The article included a still image from my camera footage, the one where Emily was cornered by the dog's flashlight frozen midair. The comment section was merciless. Finally, karma for an HOA Karen. Give those dogs medals. You can't enforce bylaws if you're behind bars. I didn't usually enjoy internet drama, but I'll admit I read every single comment. Twice. Around 9 p.m., there was a knock on my door. It was Frank Lopez. He looked 10 years older than when I'd last seen him. Eyes sunken, face drawn, wearing a wrinkled flannel like he'd given up caring. Evening, Frank, I said carefully. Can I come in? He asked. I nodded and led him to the porch. The dog stayed inside but watched through the window, silent sentinels. He rubbed his hands together. I wanted to thank you. For stopping her before she hurt someone. Or herself. I sighed. She's lucky my dogs are trained to restrain, not attack. It could have been a lot worse. He nodded, staring at the ground. She wasn't always like this. After her mother passed last year, she became obsessed with control. The HOA became her coping mechanism. Control is a dangerous drug, I said quietly. Once you start using it to feel powerful, you forget how to feel human. He gave a sad smile. Yeah, I'm filing for divorce. I can't do this anymore. I didn't blame him. He stood up to leave, but paused. For what it's worth, I think you handled this better than anyone else could have. No yelling, no revenge, just justice. Justice is enough, I said. He nodded, gave a weak wave, and walked off into the night. Later, I sat on the couch with Rex beside me, watching the last bits of the news coverage fade from the screen. My house was quiet again, finally. Peaceful. But as I looked out at the darkened neighborhood, I couldn't shake the irony. Emily had spent months preaching about community safety, and in the end, she'd become the biggest threat of all. I took a deep breath and gave Rex a pat. You did good, buddy. You all did. He licked my hand once and rested his head on my knee, eyes half closed as if to say, it's over now. But I wasn't so sure. People like Emily don't disappear overnight. They reappear, rewritten different face, same obsession. And Maplewood had been her kingdom for too long. Someone else would fill that void eventually. Still, for now, the house was calm. The dogs were safe. And for the first time in months, I slept without checking the cameras every hour. I didn't know it yet, but the real twist, the why behind everything she'd done, was still to come. And it would be darker than I could have imagined. Emily Lopez was out of my life or so, I thought. But justice has a funny way of unraveling slowly, like a tangled leash that keeps revealing new knots the more you pull. A week after her arrest, Detective Harris called me into the station. He'd been assigned to follow up on the investigation, and the moment I saw his expression, I knew it wasn't just about trespassing anymore. Matt, he said, waving me into his office, we found something in her house. Let me guess, a wall of HOA trophies, I joked, taking a seat. He didn't smile. Close, but worse. He slid a manila folder across the desk. Inside were photos, dozens of them. My house, my backyard. The dogs. Zoomed-in shots from angles that made my stomach twist. She'd been taking pictures for months, cataloging everything like evidence in some warped investigation. She kept files on half the neighborhood, Harris said. Every homeowner she's ever fined, every complaint filed against her. Color-coded folders. You had your own drawer. I scanned the notes beneath my photo, handwritten lists of violations, my schedule, even the times I walked the dogs. She was tracking me, I said quietly. Obsessively, Harris confirmed. But that's not the worst of it. He opened another folder. We pulled her financial records. Turns out she's been diverting HOA funds into a personal account for years. Fake invoices for landscaping improvements, neighborhood beautification projects, even a phantom security consultant. That consultant, her cousin in Florida. My jaw tightened. You're saying she was stealing from the HOA? Big time, he said. We're estimating close to $80, 0 inches embezzled funds. And you were getting too close. Your cameras, your formal complaints, she thought you'd expose her. That's why she targeted you. I sat back, stunned. It all made sense now, the hostility, the paranoia, the desperate need to control everything. She wasn't just drunk on power. She was trying to cover her tracks. So she broke into my house, thinking she could, delete the footage? Exactly, Harris said. She told her husband you had hidden evidence. She thought you'd recorded something that tied her to the missing HOA money. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. She nearly got herself killed over a few megabytes of guilt. Harris leaned forward. You should know her husband's cooperating. He's turned over their home computer. We're filing charges for embezzlement breaking and entering attempted theft and animal cruelty. Animal cruelty? She admitted to trying to sedate your dogs, Harris said. Said she thought she was saving them from mistreatment. I exhaled, shaking my head. Delusion meets hypocrisy. She's been transferred to county jail, he continued. Bail denied. The judge said she's a flight risk. For the first time in months, I felt something close to relief. Not triumph, just the quiet satisfaction that comes when the truth finally drags itself into daylight. By the next morning, Maplewood Estates was in full meltdown. Word spread fast. Neighbors gathered in clusters, swapping stories and shaking their heads. I couldn't walk the dogs without someone stopping me to apologize or congratulate me for ending the tyranny. One older man, Mr. Jenkins, clapped me on the shoulder and said, "You did what we all wanted to do years ago. You stood up to her." I smiled, but inside I didn't feel like a hero. I'd seen too many people self-destruct, chasing their own need for control. Emily wasn't evil, not in the cinematic sense. She was just broken, obsessed, and too proud to admit it. That night, the HOA held another emergency meeting. This time it was different. No tense silence, no pointed fingers, just a room full of exhausted homeowners ready to clean up the mess she'd left behind. Harold Green, now acting president, stood at the podium, sweat glistening under the fluorescent lights. Ladies and gentlemen, he began on behalf of the board. I want to issue a formal apology to Mr. Matthew Clark and to all residents wrongfully fined or harassed under Mrs. Lopez's leadership. Effective immediately, all pending violations are nullified. Any funds collected under false pretenses will be refunded. A wave of applause filled the room. Some people even cheered. Harold cleared his throat. We've also voted unanimously to remove Mrs. Lopez from the board permanently. Moving forward, we'll implement stricter oversight quarterly audits, and he didn't finish. The applause drowned him out. After the meeting, several neighbors approached me, some offering handshakes, others bringing baked goods, because in suburban America, nothing says forgiveness like banana bread. Denise grinned as she handed me a foil-wrapped plate. For your heroes, she said, glancing toward the dogs waiting patiently outside the hall. Thanks, I said. They've earned it. She lowered her voice. You know she had files on me too. Said my garden disrupted the neighborhood symmetry. Can you believe that? I chuckled. At this point I can believe anything. A few days later I stopped by the sheriff's office again. Harris met me with a grin this time. She confessed, he said. To the break-in, to everything, he replied. Said she was trying to restore order after years of neglect from incompetent residents. Even blamed her crimes on stress and poor leadership examples from the previous HOA president. Classic deflection, I muttered. Was she remorseful? He hesitated. She cried, but not for the reasons you'd think. She told the court she didn't understand why everyone turned on her, said she was only doing what a true leader would. That's not leadership, I said. That's ego in a power suit. He nodded. The DA's pushing for a plea deal, 2 years probation, full restitution and mandatory counseling. Sounds fair, I said. She needs help, not just punishment. Harris raised an eyebrow. You're more forgiving than most. I smiled faintly. When you've seen enough people lose themselves to pride, you stop hating them. You just hope they figure it out before it's too late. The following week, the restitution checks arrived. Most homeowners use theirs to repaint fences or fix lawns, little acts of reclaiming peace. The HOA even voted to install new security cameras around the neighborhood funded by recovered assets from Emily's case. Irony, I thought. The woman who hated surveillance had paid for it with her crimes. Life slowly returned to normal. Kids played outside again. Neighbors waved without suspicion. And my dogs, my loyal patient dogs, finally relaxed. They didn't watch the windows at night anymore. They just slept snoring softly at my feet. One evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No return address, just my name in familiar handwriting. Inside was a single piece of paper. Mr. Clark, I know you'll probably never forgive me, but I need to say this. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was trying to fix something inside myself that broke a long time ago. After my mother died, I lost control of everything. The HOA was the only thing that made sense. I convinced myself I was helping people when really I was just punishing them for my own pain. Your dogs didn't attack me that night. They protected you. And maybe in a twisted way they protected me too from doing something even worse. I'm sorry. Truly. Emily Lopez, I read it twice, then folded it carefully and set it on the counter. Forgiveness didn't come easily, but the thing about closure is that sometimes it doesn't arrive with a bang. It comes quietly in the form of an apology you never expected. 2 weeks later, I ran into Frank Lopez outside the post office. He looked lighter, freer, like a man who'd finally stepped out of a long shadow. Divorce final, I asked? He nodded. Last week? She's in counseling now. Says she's trying to make amends. That's good, I said. She needed a wake-up call. He smiled faintly. You gave it to her. Not with anger, with consequences. There's a difference. I shrugged. Sometimes consequences are the best teachers. He chuckled. Maybe. But between you and me, I think those dogs did most of the teaching. We both laughed, shaking hands before parting ways. As I drove home, the sun poured through the windshield, warm and golden. Maplewood felt different now, lighter, calmer. For the first time in a long while, the only sounds were birds' laughter and the steady rhythm of paws trotting beside me. Justice had been served, the truth revealed, and peace restored. But as any canine officer knows, you never drop your guard completely, because there's always another storm brewing somewhere just beyond the fence line. Still that night, as I sat on the porch watching my 5 dogs doze in the fading light, I allowed myself one rare simple thought. Maybe, just maybe this time, the neighborhood had finally learned its lesson. 3 months passed. Fall crept in, quietly covering Maplewood Estates in a thin blanket of gold and amber leaves. For the first time since I'd moved there, the neighborhood actually looked like one of those idyllic postcards, kids riding bikes, neighbors chatting by the mailboxes, dogs barking happily in backyards. It almost felt normal. Almost. Every so often someone would stop me while I was out walking the dogs to ask, "Hey Matt, whatever happened to Emily Lopez? She's doing community service," I'd answer. At the county animal shelter, that always earned a raised eyebrow or a smirk. Justice had a sense of humor this time. After the court hearings wrapped up, the judge sentenced Emily to 2 years probation, a $10,000 restitution payment to the HOA, and 400 hours of community service, specifically working with rescue dogs. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The woman who once tried to kidnap my dogs was now scooping kibble for strays. She also had a 5-year restraining order that kept her 500 feet away from me, my property, or my animals. Her husband Frank finalized their divorce soon after. He came by once to thank me again, saying, "It's strange, but I think she's better now. She's calmer," she said, cleaning kennels is therapeutic. I chuckled. "Yeah, nothing like a mop and 50 barking dogs to humble a person." He smiled sadly. "She asked if you'd accept a letter someday. Not soon, just when you're ready." I nodded but said nothing. I wasn't sure I ever would be. The new HOA president, Harold Green, turned out to be a decent man. Transparent, polite, and smart enough to stay out of people's private lives. He stopped by my house one afternoon with a folder of documents. "Mr. Clark," he began nervously, "we'd like to offer you a position on the new board. Maybe even chair the Community Safety Committee." I laughed outright. "After everything that's happened, Harold, the only committee I want to chair is the Leave Me Alone committee." He grinned sheepishly. Can't blame me for trying. To his credit, things genuinely improved. The HOA's new policies focused on accountability, open votes, quarterly audits, resident feedback sessions. For once, Maplewood didn't feel like a dictatorship. It felt like a community again. Still, Emily's shadow lingered. There were moments when I caught myself checking the cameras out of habit scanning for her silver SUV or that sharp silhouette near the fence line. Old instincts die hard. But life moved forward. One chilly morning in December, I was sitting on my porch with a mug of coffee when the mail truck pulled up. The carrier, an older man named Benny, handed me an envelope. "Certified letter," he said. "From the county." I frowned, signed for it, and tore it open. It wasn't from the county. It was from Emily Lopez. "Dear Mr. Clark, I promised I'd write when I had something worth saying. I've spent the last few months cleaning cages, feeding strays, and watching dogs that have seen worse than I ever did, and yet they still wag their tails when someone shows them kindness. That's what finally broke me. I realized I'd spent years barking at shadows, trying to control everything because I couldn't control myself. The HOA wasn't about helping others, it was about silencing my own fear. I can't take back what I did to you or your dogs. I see it in my sleep sometimes, that moment when they surrounded me. It wasn't anger I saw in their eyes. It was judgment. And they were right. I've started therapy. I'm learning about boundaries, power, and guilt. The counselor says I have obsessive-compulsive personality disorder. That fits, doesn't it? Maybe it's not an excuse, but it's an explanation. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to be someone my husband and community wouldn't be afraid of. If it means anything, those dogs saved my life that night, not from them, but from myself. Emily Lopez. I stared at the letter for a long time, not angry, not triumphant, just quiet. For months, I'd built her up in my mind as a monster, an enemy, but reading her words, I realized she was something else entirely, a human being who'd lost her compass. Power had been her crutch, and when it was ripped away, she'd fallen apart. I folded the letter and slipped it into a drawer with the rest of the case files. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. Sometimes that's enough. Life at Maplewood returned to a steady rhythm. The dogs thrived. Rex, the old veteran, finally got the retirement he deserved. No more patrols, no more stress, just sunny naps on the porch. Nova became something of a local celebrity. Kids in the neighborhood called her the hero dog. The HOA even voted to install a community dog park, a full reversal of Emily's no dogs allowed policy. When the ribbon-cutting ceremony came around, Harold insisted I attend. "You started this," he said. "You deserve to be there." So I went. Watching families laugh and play where suspicion once festered was oddly satisfying. Even the local news showed up to film a short segment titled, "From HOA War to Community Harmony." They asked me for a quote. I said, "Sometimes peace doesn't come from rules, it comes from learning when to stop fighting." Later that night, I sat by the fireplace with the dogs sprawled around me. The soft crackle of the fire mixed with the rhythmic breathing of 5 content canines. I thought about everything that had happened, the fear, the anger, the absurdity, and how it all led here. Emily had tried to break into my house to steal control. In the end, she lost everything. But maybe losing everything was what she needed to start again. That's the thing about justice, it's not always about punishment. Sometimes it's about restoration. And forgiveness, well, it's like training a dog. It takes time, patience, and the willingness to see beyond the mistakes. A few weeks later, I got another envelope. No return address again. Inside was a single photo: Emily at the animal shelter, kneeling beside a rescued German shepherd, smiling softly. On the back, she'd written just 3 words. "Thank you, Matthew." I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just nodded and placed the photo next to my favorite picture of Rex in his police vest. For the first time in a long while, I felt something close to peace. Because in the end, this wasn't a story about revenge. It was about redemption, hers, mine, maybe even the whole neighborhood's. And as I leaned back, listening to the wind outside, I whispered the same line I told every rookie cop I'd ever trained. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought in streets or courtrooms, they're fought in our own hearts. The dogs stirred one by one, and Nova rested her head on my knee, sighing softly. "Yeah," I said, patting her fur. "You girls did good." Outside, the streetlights glowed over a quiet, peaceful Maplewood. The kind of peace that doesn't come from rules or fines, but from lessons learned the hard way. In the end, this story wasn't about dogs, fences, or HOA drama. It was about control, and what happens when fear disguises itself as authority. Emily Lopez wanted power because it made her feel safe. But true safety doesn't come from control. It comes from trust, compassion, and accountability. We all know someone like her, the neighbor, the boss, the relative, who can't stop micromanaging everyone's life. But sometimes those people aren't villains. They're just broken in ways we don't see. That doesn't mean you excuse what they do. You stand your ground. You protect what's yours. But when the dust settles, maybe you leave just enough space for them to change. Because real justice isn't about revenge. It's about stopping the cycle of harm. And sometimes the best guardians aren't wearing badges. They're wagging their tails. If you've ever stood your ground against a bully, HOA or otherwise, share your story in the comments. And if you believe in standing up for what's right, don't forget to subscribe for more HOA tales of karma, courage, and canine justice.